"Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private establishment." The voice was smooth, but underneath the professional courtesy was a sharp edge of steel. It was the voice of a man used to being obeyed, a man who believed he was protecting a sanctuary of luxury from the unworthy. The man being addressed, Julian Vance, stood silently. The coarse fabric of his worn hoodie suddenly felt heavier under the store's soft, expensive lighting. He looked from the manager's condescending face to the gleaming counters filled with treasures he himself had brought into existence. This was his world. His empire. And he was being thrown out of it. A small, humorless smile touched his lips. The manager had no idea. He had no idea he wasn't just ejecting some nobody, he was detonating his own career. Julian wasn't there by accident. He was on a mission to find the sickness rotting his company from the inside out. And he had just found patient zero. Section 1, The Architect of Dreams. Julian Vance wasn't born into a world of Italian leather and Swiss watches. His world was one of working-class parents who taught him that a person's worth is written in their character, not their bank account. His father worked an assembly line for 40 years, teaching Julian the value of building something that lasts. From those humble beginnings, Julian forged the Elysian Collective. It wasn't just another luxury brand, it was a philosophy. He started it from a garage with an idea, to create objects of breathtaking quality that told a story. The company's motto, plastered on the wall of every boutique, was "Dignitas in omnibus, dignity in all things." For 2 decades, Julian lived that ethos. He was a hands-on CEO who believed the culture he'd so painstakingly built was real. That belief began to crack on a Tuesday. Buried deep in a customer relations folder was a flagged message with a simple subject line, "A question of welcome." It was marked "Resolved," but something made Julian click. The email was from an architecture student who had saved for 6 months to buy an Elysian wallet for his father. He wrote not in anger, but with profound disappointment. He described entering the flagship store, the heart of Julian's empire, with excitement. But from the moment he stepped inside, he was treated like a suspect. He wrote of associates who looked right through him, a security guard who shadowed his every move, and a manager who made it clear he was wasting their time. "I left without the wallet," the email concluded. "Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I felt I couldn't afford the price of admission, which seemed to be something other than money. I walked out feeling unseen." Julian read it 3 times. Resolved. How? He dug deeper. The resolution was a canned apology email offering a 10% discount. It was a digital pat on the head. An insult on top of an injury. The young man hadn't been complaining about a product, he'd been reporting a theft of his dignity. A cold fury settled over Julian. This wasn't an isolated incident, he knew it in his bones. It was a symptom. His company's motto had become a lie. He could send memos or hold conference calls, but it wouldn't be enough. To truly understand the disease, he had to see it for himself. He called his COO, Evelyn, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd been with him from the start, and laid out the plan. He would go undercover. Not to some suburban mall, but to the crown jewel, the Fifth Avenue flagship store. Evelyn was horrified. "Julian, this is insane. What if someone recognizes you? You'll just prove something you already suspect." "The upside, Ev, is the truth," Julian countered. "I need to know if we are who we say we are. I need to feel what that young man felt." He went home to his vast walk-in closet, a room filled with bespoke suits, and reached into the very back for a dusty box. Inside were the clothes of a man he used to be. Faded jeans, a nondescript gray hoodie with a small tear near the cuff, and a pair of worn-out work boots. He pulled a Yankees cap down low and looked in the mirror. The CEO vanished. In his place was a man who, in the cold calculus of high-end retail, would be judged and found wanting. He was ready. Section 2, Through the Looking Glass, the next day, the biting November air of Manhattan did little to cool the apprehension in Julian's chest. The grand facade of the flagship store loomed ahead, the name Elysian Collective, a name he doodled on a napkin 20 years ago, etched in elegant script above the door. He watched from across the street. A black town car pulled up, and a doorman rushed to open the door for a woman in a fur stole, bowing his head in deference. Julian took a deep breath and crossed the street. As he approached, the doorman's welcoming smile vanished. His eyes did a swift, professional scan. From the worn boots to the frayed cap, and his posture stiffened. He didn't open the door. He just stood there, a human barrier. Julian pulled the heavy brass handle himself and stepped inside. The world changed. The air was scented with leather and cedarwood. The marble floors gleamed. Soft lighting made every product glitter like a museum piece. But today, Julian wasn't the architect of this temple. He was an intruder. Two sales associates, who had been chatting animatedly, fell silent. Their friendly expressions were replaced by a cool, guarded watchfulness. They performed the same dismissive inventory as the doorman. He felt their gaze follow him as he walked through the store. It wasn't overt hostility. It was something worse, complete and total erasure. He was invisible, or rather, visible only as a problem. Near the back, a young woman with bright, curious eyes was arranging a display. She looked up, and a genuine, welcoming smile lit up her face. She took a step towards him, ready to offer a greeting, but before she could speak, a man appeared at her side. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. A small plaque on his lapel read "Mark, Store Director." Julian recognized him from corporate headshots. Mark didn't look at Julian. He spoke to the young woman in a low, sharp tone. "Restock the cashmere, Maya. Now." Maya flushed, her smile faltering. She glanced apologetically at Julian before hurrying to the stockroom. Mark then turned his attention to Julian. He didn't approach, just stood with his arms crossed, an emperor surveying an unwanted presence. The message was clear: "I'm watching you." Julian decided to force it. He walked to the watch counter, home to his pride and joy. He leaned over the glass, showing interest in the Celestial, a watch with the price tag of a luxury car. After a full minute of being ignored, Julian looked up. "Excuse me," he said politely to a nearby associate. The associate, a young man with a bored expression, finally glanced at him. "Yes. Could you tell me about the movement in this piece?" Julian asked. The associate glanced at the watch, then back at Julian's hoodie. A tiny smirk played on his lips. "It's automatic," he said, the single word dripping with condescension, before immediately turning his back to greet a well-dressed woman. Julian felt a familiar heat rise in his chest. It was the feeling the young man from the email had described, being unseen. A ghost in his own machine. He continued his tour, running a hand over a hand-stitched leather bag, feeling the weight of unspoken judgment with every step. The security guard had subtly shifted position to be closer. This was a calculated system of exclusion, and it was being orchestrated by the man in the navy suit. Julian took a steadying breath and walked towards him. As Julian approached, Mark's expression hardened from passive observation to active annoyance. "Excuse me," Julian began, his voice even. "I have a few questions about your bespoke services." Mark's eyes flickered down to Julian's boots. "Our bespoke program is by appointment only," he stated flatly. The subtext was clear, "and you will never get one." "I understand," Julian replied calmly. "I was just curious about the process. I read you can customize the briefcase linings." Mark sighed impatiently. "Sir, the bespoke program is a very exclusive process. Perhaps you'd be better served looking at our ready-to-wear items." He gestured vaguely toward a rack of small leather goods, a clear dismissal. Julian pressed on. "I'm not interested in those. I'm interested in the founder's briefcase." He pointed to the most expensive leather item in the store. And I'm also interested in that coat. He gestured to a mannequin wearing a beautiful, full-length cashmere overcoat. I'd like to try it on. This was the final test. For a moment, Mark looked stunned, as if the request was too absurd to process. Then, a mask of false politeness descended. "Ah," he said with a thin, patronizing smile. "The Langston coat. An exquisite piece. Unfortunately, that is a display model from our archival collection. It's not available to be tried on." He delivered the lie with effortless confidence. Julian's last shred of hope for the man died. "That's strange," he said, pulling out his phone. "I was just looking at it on your app. It says here it's from the current collection and available in all sizes." He held up the phone. The silence was tense. Mark's polished facade finally cracked, his false smile replaced by a flash of raw contempt. "Listen to me," he began, stepping closer. "I don't know what game you're playing, but this is a place for serious clients. Sir, I don't think you can afford anything in here. Let's be honest." And then, he delivered the final blow. "Maybe you should try the store across the street. I hear they have a sale." It was then that Maya, the young associate, reappeared. She stopped dead, her eyes wide with horror as she took in the scene, the undisguised bigotry on her manager's face and the quiet stillness of the man he was insulting. Everything must have been screaming at her to stay silent, to just walk away. But she didn't. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "Stop. He's a customer. Let me help him." Mark whirled on her. "You will go to the back, and you will stay there until I call for you. Is that understood? This is your final warning." Maya looked from Mark's enraged face to Julian's calm one. Her own face was a battleground of fear and conviction. She held Julian's gaze, a silent apology passing between them, before her shoulders slumped and she walked away, head bowed. Julian had seen enough. He had seen the poison and he had seen the antidote. He gave Mark a long, unreadable look. "Thank you for your time," he said softly. "You've been very illuminating." He turned and walked toward the door. The security guard, now standing right at the exit, pulled the door open for him with a triumphant smirk. As Julian stepped back into the cold chaos of the city, he felt a profound sadness. This wasn't a new story. He thought of the studies he'd read, how a majority of black shoppers, well over half in some polls, reported facing unfair treatment and prejudice in retail stores. He thought of Oprah Winfrey being told a handbag was too expensive for her in a Swiss boutique. It was an old, ugly story. And today, it had played out in a temple he had built. His sadness hardened into cold, resolute determination. Change wasn't just necessary. It was mandatory. And it was going to begin tomorrow. Section 4, The Reckoning. The next morning at 8 a.m., an email landed in the inbox of every store employee. It announced a mandatory all-hands meeting in 30 minutes for a surprise corporate audit of brand integrity. Panic erupted. Brand integrity audit was corporate speak for a shakedown. Mark, the store director, barked orders, trying to project control. He was certain this was about sales numbers and prepped his excuses, never once imagining it could be about anything else. At precisely 8:30 a.m., the front doors opened. It wasn't a team of auditors who walked in. It was Julian Vance. He was not the man from yesterday. He wore a magnificent dark gray suit, and on his wrist, the celestial watch glittered. Flanking him were Evelyn, his COO, and David, the head of human resources. The staff fell into a stunned silence. They all recognized the founder, the legend. Mark rushed forward, a panicked smile plastered on his face as he extended a trembling hand. "Mr. Vance. What an incredible, unexpected honor. If I had known, I would have prepared a proper welcome for you." Julian didn't take the hand. He just looked at Mark, his eyes cold, holding the gaze until Mark's smile faltered and his hand dropped. In that moment, a flicker of dawning, abject horror crossed Mark's face. He was looking at the CEO, but he was seeing the ghost of the man in the gray hoodie. A proper welcome? Julian finally said, his quiet voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. You mean, like the welcome you gave me yesterday? A collective gasp went through the staff. All eyes darted between Julian and Mark, whose face had turned ashen white. Mr. Vance. I don't understand, Mark stammered. Don't you, Mark? Julian said, taking a step forward. Yesterday, I came into my store. I wasn't the CEO. I was just a man in a hoodie. And you, and your team, judged me. You ignored me. And you, personally, insulted me and told me to leave. He swept his gaze across the staff. Our motto is, dignitas in omnibus. Dignity in all things. They are not just words. They are the foundation of this company. A price tag is a number. Dignity is priceless. And yesterday, you put a price tag on a man's dignity based on his clothes. He paused. You failed, he said, his voice ringing with finality. You failed our customers. You failed our brand. You failed yourselves. He looked back at Mark, who seemed to be shrinking. This isn't a punishment, Mark. It's a consequence. You are a guardian of our culture, and you have become its poison. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. David, the head of HR, stepped forward and gestured Mark towards an office. The man nodded numbly and walked away. Julian then addressed the rest of the staff. For those of you who were on duty yesterday and chose to be complicit in your silence, you are all on probation. You will undergo mandatory and intensive retraining. Some of you will not make it through. That is a promise. Finally, his expression softened. Maya, he said gently. Please step forward. Maya, looking terrified, slowly came to the front. Yesterday, everyone here failed, Julian said, a genuine warmth in his eyes. But you tried. You were the only person in this store who remembered what dignity in all things actually means. You showed courage and character. And in this company, that is what we reward. He turned to Evelyn. Ev, as of today, I'm creating a new position, Lead Customer Experience Advocate for the New York region. It's a role focused on ensuring our values are lived, not just spoken. And I want Maya to be the first to hold that title. She will be instrumental in helping us roll out the new training protocols for this entire region. Maya stared at him, her eyes filling with tears of shock and gratitude. A quiet murmur of disbelief and dawning respect rippled through the remaining staff. Conclusion and CTA, Julian addressed the room one last time. What happened here was a failure, but it is not an ending. It's a new beginning. Today, we are announcing the Dignity Protocol, a company-wide, zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. We will be the brand we claim to be. We will earn back our good name. We will start today. The story of what happened on Fifth Avenue spread like wildfire. It became a legend, a cautionary tale, and a statement of intent. It was a painful, necessary lesson, proving that a company's true value isn't in its inventory, but in the character of its people. What would you have done if you were in Maya's position? What do you think is the most effective way to combat everyday prejudice? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. And if you believe stories like these are important, please subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to see it.